welcome to JPod. This is a podcast on journalists and journalism. My name is Krishna Prasad and it's great to have you here. Over 26,000 Indians have perished due to COVID in the last 4 months. But is there an image of any one of them that is imprinted in your mind? A single photograph in your newspaper or magazine that you remember instantly? Whether they are natural or man-made, tragedies are implanted in the collective consciousness by iconic pictures. Who can forget the photograph of that unknown child being buried in Bhopal in 1984? Or the folded hands of the tailor pleading for help in Gujarat in 2002? But COVID is a pandemic in which the victims have been reduced to mere numbers without names or faces. Its impact on the media industry left little room for soaring photography initially. And on top of that, there has been a marked reluctance of editors to play up tragedy. The casualty of all this is a gaping hole in journalism, the dance of death undocumented. My guest today on JPod has filled a vital blank in the coverage. Parul Sharma is a Delhi-based fine art photographer. For 15 years, Parul was spokesperson for India's largest media conglomerate, Star TV. But in the last 3 years, she's found a métier in photography, chronicling everything from the Kumbh to Colaba. When COVID broke, Parul did what most of us would have been reluctant to: confront it head-on at cemeteries and burial grounds and crematoria. Using just a mobile phone, Parul captured the last lap of hundreds of lives, even when their near and dear ones had abandoned them, producing images that take the breath away. In this episode of JPod, Parul Sharma discusses how she embarked on a project that has few equals in Indian journalism. But before we get into that conversation, here's a short message.
Social media, a place where you get news, views, arguments, fun stuff, vicious rants, all of which can drive you insane. It's all so confusing. Don't you wish there was a way to cut through all the noise? Say hello to the Net Paper, a first of its kind newsletter, a digital newspaper in your inbox, one that gets you the news, the views, and the juice from Facebook and Twitter, TikTok and Instagram. If you wish to get the Net Paper in your email, do go to the netpaper.substack.com and hit subscribe. The Net Paper, all the juice that's fit to share.
Hello, Parul. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast interview from Shanti Niketan, the Shanti Niketan in Delhi, of course. And thank you very much for joining me. How are you doing?
Thank you, Krishna Prasad. It's good to hear your voice. And I hope you're keeping well and safe.
Parul, in the last 4 months since this pandemic began, in all the newspapers and magazines and websites I have seen in this period, I have not seen a photographic exercise as mind-blowing as yours. Day after day, you seem to have visited hospitals, but more than that, you seem to have visited burial grounds and cemeteries and crematoria and shot superb, even if macabre pictures, but superb pictures of human beings sent on their final journey. I just want to get a sense from you as to how and why you embarked on this really visually arresting project. What made you get onto this project?
So, Krishna, I actually started photographing the lockdown. When the lockdown began, I actually started shooting towards March end. And in the beginning, my whole objective was to shoot the Delhi's architecture in its glory and in its magnificence. So the whole idea began with that. But then as I was following the narrative kept sort of unfolding, kept changing. And I actually stopped counting my steps, so I kept walking, and while following the narrative wherever it took me, whether it was a burial ground or the Delhi Electric Crematorium at Nizampur Ghat or the Christian cemetery. So I actually stopped counting my steps. I just went wherever the narrative took me.
So essentially, you're saying that you just started randomly, but as the deaths started growing, this became more important, right?
I didn't start randomly. I had a very clear objective in my mind. As a photographer, you of course know what you are following and what would you like to kind of, what is the narrative that you're following. So I knew in my mind as to what I was going for, but of course we did not know at that point how the narrative would shift. That we would see so many deaths. And as you know, that Delhi has just crossed India has just crossed the million mark.
Yeah.
So it was when the lockdown began, I was actually towards the end of January. I was browsing, and I saw this picture actually, which that picture actually left a great mark in my mind. The picture was from a AFP journalist who was based in Shanghai, but he was deputed by AFP to cover Ground Zero, which was Wuhan at that point, where the virus originated. So he, along with a team of 4 journalists, were deputed. Were sent to Wuhan to cover the Ground Zero. And I don't know if you may have seen this picture, Krishna. That picture is of a man lying on a road in Wuhan. It was shot, I think, on January 30th, 2020. And the man, the dead man who's lying on the ground, is wearing a black colored suit, and actually is well clad. And he's got a face mask on, and he's lying dead on the ground. It was not established at that point of time whether the man died of COVID-19 or not. But that picture was shot just a few miles away from a hospital.
I see.
Yeah. And that picture kind of left a mark in my mind, and I kept revisiting that picture for some reason, because I just, the whole emptiness, the solitude, and of course, apart from being tragic and sad, there was something so arresting in that picture. It was almost arresting, at the same time hard-hitting, and it just kind of evoked many emotions in me. And I don't know why I kept going to that picture. And that's the time, when we were all sort of looking at Wuhan, with great, we were all the world was wondering what's happening in Wuhan, and then those pictures started originating from that part of the region. And so that picture, I think, left a mark. It was something very similar. There are 2 images in the recent past which have left a great mark. The other picture was of the AP photographer, Richard Drew. Richard Drew's image of the falling man from the World Trade Center.
Yeah.
It is an iconic image, and of course we've all seen it, and but there is something very similar to me as a photographer. In both the images, there is even in that World Trade Center image, the falling man, the man who's falling is wearing a suit, is well clad, and the certain aesthetics of it, which kind of made me kind of go back to these 2 images. And so then, of course, I wanted to go out and shoot, and as a photographer, it was very, very difficult for me to sit just inside the home and not go out and shoot. And hence I decided to venture out.
No, that's very good, because I know that you shot many other pictures besides these bodies and cremations which we are talking about, but that really is the striking point, which is that you as a photographer have generally shot stylish, very high society, hi-fi images, and for you to really get your hands and legs dirty shooting these pictures is quite something. And frankly, although it might seem like flattery, photography fills a very vital blank, which is documenting the darkest part of this most dramatic time. What
Right.
really, enables you to do this, in the sense that I presume you, like all of us, just have a passing, connection with death. We just know of a few, we've been to a few funerals, etc. But to go there day after day takes something. What is it that took you there besides just the dramatic moment we are in?
I began documenting architecture,
Yeah.
whether it was the architecture of the capital, or I'm actually also working simultaneously on a book called Kulaba, which is documenting a Kulaba through a visual narrative. I almost also documented Kumbh last year, Kumbh, when I went to Allahabad and Varanasi to not only document Nagas, but also to document the LGBTQ, the transgender community, because as per Section 377, it was decriminalized last year, and it was amazing to see them participate in the biggest festival of spirituality, or the biggest gathering of religion so it was so I don't know whether you call it hi-fi, but yes, I've been a documenter in my own way, which I never actually realized. As I said, I almost always follow my heart.
Yeah.
So wherever my heart takes me. But when the pandemic began, my whole purpose was, of course, to kind of document it. And as I'm sure you've heard, as the great photographer, war photographer Robert Capa said, if your picture is not good enough, you're not close enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to be close enough to be able to document. You cannot do it while being away from your subject. Yes, so that's the diktat I followed.
Of course, I know that you've shot some of these pictures, and and I know that many photographers have shot stuff. But what you've not seen enough in Indian media is this final journey. We haven't seen it in too many newspapers. I don't see great display. I don't see great color photography of what's happening in this last lap of life. This is quite in contrast to what you see in the New York Times or Le Monde. You see a whole lot of stuff happening there. That's where I came from, which is that you seem to have embarked on a project that nobody seems to be doing at this point. So have you noticed anything like this in Indian media so far?
Yes, I have. In fact, there are a lot of Indian press photographers, photojournalists who are doing an amazing job, especially from from AP, from Associated Press, from Reuters, even from PTI. They're doing a wonderful job. In fact, even New York Times. So there are journalists like Altaf Qadri from Associated Press. There is Adnan Abidi, who's a two-time from Reuters. There is Atul Loke in Bombay,
Of course.
for New York Times. There is Ravi Chaudhary and Arun Sharma from PTI. So these are journalists who are doing an amazing job in terms of covering, and they're actually doing so more from a news perspective. Considering I'm not working for any press agency or a publication, I was deciding my own mandate every morning. I had no mandate to follow per se. So I was the only difference is perhaps these wonderful photographers are following a mandate, but in my case, I had to fix my own. I had to chalk out my own mandate every morning, and I was just following that. But you are right, the imagery that is coming across from different parts of the world is so arresting, is heartbreaking, it is hard hitting. It has so many elements. I mean, I was inspired also from a lot of international press photographers like Andrea Frazetta from Italy, who actually was in Bergamo. He actually lives in Milan. He's a contributor to New York Times, and his mother actually died of COVID-19. At the same time, while he was documenting a few hospitals in Bergamo, which was the worst hit, which is in the northeast of Milan, and he's a celebrated photographer, but he actually went inside these hospitals, the ICUs, the wards, and he shot the doctors and nurses and the health staff extensively, and very courageous work. And there are so many others like Philip Montgomery from New York. There is Hector Retmal again, which I spoke about his image in the beginning of the conversation. Then there's Paolo Miranda from Italy. So yes, there's a tremendous amount of work coming across, but I don't know whether the Indian publications have a particular mandate. They are just using images which I think kind of caters to their audiences, and perhaps there is a diktat that you cannot show very sort of in-depth, perhaps, I don't know, you would know better. Is there a particular diktat which says that you cannot show death so closely?
Oh, not at all. There's no diktat as such. Photographers are doing a fine job, I know that. But you don't see space for the kind of pictures I see of yours. I don't see, a fantastic funeral picture, a moving procession. I don't see any of that. Of course, there are restrictions and all that, I know that. But still, I don't see any great display, any great photo essay. And that is where I was coming from. But that we can get into. But Parul, in a few days' time, we will have essentially been 4 months into this pandemic. I think March 24th, 25th is when this lockdown began. In these 120 days, or let's say in these 100 days, on how many days have you visited these crematoria, funeral grounds, cemeteries, burial grounds? How many days have you gone? How many bodies have you seen really, being laid to rest? I know it's a morbid question, but how many pictures have you taken so far, really, all put together?
I've shot almost close to 10,000 images so far of Delhi under lockdown.
Yeah.
Out of which I have been to the burial ground perhaps 4 or 5 times. The burial ground, Muslim burial ground, that is at Bahadur Shah Zafarnar. Then I have been to the Christian cemetery. I've been to Nigam Bodh Ghat on a couple of occasions. And of course, I've visited various government hospitals like AIMS, Safdarjung, even Lady Harding. I've been inside wards. The only place I haven't been allowed to visit is the intensive care unit. Yeah. I have seen several. I've stopped counting. I've seen several dead bodies. In fact, on one of my first one of the first occasions where this ambulance kind of parked itself, and bodies wrapped in a slithery plastic arrived in it, and it was astounding to me. I have never seen 4 dead bodies together to begin with. In the past, one only visited a cremation ground if you lost a loved one. So and seeing 2 bodies together, it was a first for me. And more than anything, more than the dead body, it is like the Amazon delivery, the way they are packed in a slithery white plastic. Yeah. It is, and then loaded clinically on a handcart, inside the crematorium, or for the lowering the body at the burial ground. And then, that was something. It is like a requiem for the forsaken. This is the first time that we are dreading the dead more than death.
Yeah, that's well put.
Yeah. So that is, and in India, we have this huge tradition of the rites of passage,
Yeah.
We amongst all cultures, there is, it may be ritualistically, it may be different for each culture, but it is still, it's a big thing for all of us. So in a COVID death, that's what happens. You are It's a very lonely death. It is an unforgivable death. The senselessness of having your breath suddenly taken, first of all, it's ridiculous by a wretched virus, right?
Yeah.
And corona for death is like a very dark fairy tale. It is just, if I was to describe the electric crematorium in Nigampur Ghat, I had never been inside. It was my first time, and the putrid air in that large hall, which has a very industrial kind of a look,
Yeah.
the cemented wall and those furnaces there, it is almost sinister. And there is no sentiment of an afterlife at all. Like, we attach this great importance to afterlife, right? As Hindus.
Yeah.
It is nothing of that sort. It is just what should I say? It is a tragic sight, and it is it's not. It just leaves you with a scar. I mean, this is a scar that I'll carry for the rest of my life. It will go, with me, because and there was a point in the crematorium when I was alone shooting, and I was left with two bodies, and the crematorium workers went out to check on other bodies which were arriving, and that's the time I realized that I was alone. And there is a certain smell inside the hall which actually I carried it with me for the next days to come.
I see.
Would just not go. Perhaps it was in my mind, but it would just not go.
Yeah. No, that's exactly where I was coming to, because with all things considered, you're also a woman photographer. I was wondering whether they let you in very easily in most of these places, especially given the restrictions. Did you have a free passage into these crematoria and grounds?
I didn't have a free passage. You had to take the necessary approvals.
Yeah.
But I must say that everybody was very cooperative on ground. So I had no trouble per se. But yes, there was always a question mark on the faces of people when they would see me there, and it was like, and a lot of people actually, how we have this big tradition of, when you don't seek advice, people come and give you free advice. So they would come up, walk up to me, and they would tell me that I shouldn't risk my life by being here, and why am I being so? Why am I there? And I should not be outside. I should be home.
Did that thought ever strike you that you were risking your life while shooting these pictures?
Yes, always. It's always in the back of your mind. It's a very unsettling kind of thought, which is always lingering there. It is, each time I would come back, I would think, is my throat hurting? Is my body feeling warmer than normal? Do I have it? Yes, it's always there, even now, because I'm still shooting and I will continue shooting. So, yes, that feeling is always there in the back of your head.
And how did you start going about doing this? In the sense, how did you plan your day? Would you just land up at these crematoriums and funeral grounds, or would you just call somebody, make inquiries? How did you do this? Did you just randomly land up?
No. You cannot. I would go with the chalked out, in like a proper plan. I have a lot of friends who would whose help I would rely on from the journalistic fraternity of the capital. They would they have a great nexus in terms of knowing what's gonna, like, how many bodies, because they get a tip off from the hospital authorities. And they're in with all the within the ecosystem, that how it works. They are pretty aware. So I would seek their advice and guidance, and then but I was actually on my own. I would drive my own car, and I would land up in these places.
You mentioned 4 bodies on one day at one time, but what has been the most moving picture you've shot so far? The most moving?
The most moving picture was actually the first time that I saw the COVID body, which was at Nigambod Ghat, and there was a point then the first body arrived, and they kind of carted the body inside the crematorium, and I followed the body, and they left it on a handcart, and the electric crematorium, which has 3 furnaces right in front, and the body was kept in a straightforward position, and it was just left there because they went out to bring the other body, and I was alone with the body. That image is to my mind. I mean, I'm very close to that image because there is in my work. I don't know if you've noticed, and that's something very dear to me, or perhaps comes naturally to me. Is I love that sense of solitude in an image, and I always feel that without having too many elements. So it is just that I think it has everything that's fallen in place. And it's also very poetic in its own way. Pardon my saying so. I know there's nothing poetic about, and it's tragic. Death is tragic, but the sense of solitude, the silence, and the peaceful aspect of that crematorium inside the whole environment, and the body waiting. Actually, the body was waiting to go to a better world. Let me put it like that. Because here, perhaps, it was forsaken by his or her. I don't even know the gender of the body. It was the family didn't show up for the last rites. They didn't come. So it was dealt by the crematorium workers, and it was, I must say, they gave so much dignity and respect to the body. I was, and for them it is because they were doing it in such a mechanical way. They get so many bodies in a day, so they could be mechanical about it. But I was there witnessing it. But I have so much respect for the way they handled each body day in, day out.
You must have become a familiar figure for some of those funeral workers, right?
Right.
Did you strike up any friendships, and did they give you an indication if the number of bodies coming in now is much higher than before?
Yes, you're absolutely. In fact, the other day when I went to the Muslim burial ground, there are far more graves which have been, dug, and they have a bulldozer now to help, to make it more sort of faster and quicker. And it's highly unfortunate. I mean, it's tragic and sad. In fact, after my shoot, we would all gather and have a cup of tea together.
I see.
And discuss. In the beginning, I was a bit hesitant about sipping the tea, but come on, they are fine. They're doing fine.
That's really wonderful of you.
And in fact, I spoke to them at length. In fact, I want to revisit and actually document their lives after a later point in time, because they have very interesting stories. In fact, a friend of mine documented a Muslim health worker. He's an on-ground worker whose job is to bring a dead COVID body from the hospital up to the burial ground or the cemetery or the crematorium. And he's a very young guy. Actually, he's pursuing. He's just finished school, and his name, if I'm not mistaken, is Chand Muhammad. Yeah, and he has handled many Hindu bodies, dead bodies. His aim is to become a doctor, but he is doing this job because there is nobody to, there's no earning member in the family.
Yeah.
And he does this day in, day out.
You went to burial grounds and crematoria of different faiths. Did you find any difference between the way in which these different faiths, Hindus, Muslims, Christians, etc., were dealing with the dead, or was there a common kind of thread running through?
There was one common thread, the fear across. That's what I saw in everyone's eye. Even the workers, the crematorium workers, the people at the cemetery, in the burial ground, hospital workers, even those people who were bringing the dead bodies in the ambulances. But at the same time, I also saw the fighting spirit of people. So there was there were two key elements that I saw. One was the saddest, and the other was the bravest.
And there was nobody happy in a sense, some sense of relief.
No, the other aspect I also saw is the humane aspect. Like how the last body that was one very small child, 7-month-old child, died of COVID, and I will not name the religion, but his body was buried by not his parents, because parents actually left him in the hospital when they realized that the child is COVID positive. And his last rites were handled by a group of people who were diametrically opposite to that of his religion. And they knew that aspect, but they still came forward. And I did this, and I have so much respect for them. And so those are also the kind of things that you saw.
With families abandoning their own dear and near ones, what lessons did you learn from this thing, you think?
The families who have abandoned, I cannot say that whether it's right or wrong for them, because when it comes to your own life, Krishna, people are very, of course, when you think you can lose your own life, then people tend to be, I won't call it selfish, but whatever the word is, people, you want to protect yourself and your life. But there was a lot of panic in the beginning, and there was a lot of stigmatization around COVID deaths, which I think is kind of settling down now. People are becoming a little more aware. They're realizing that there is no harm as long as they go for the last rites, as long as they are careful and they do not come in close contact with the body. So, I would not like to have a judgment call, but the lessons learned are many. The lessons learned are many. The first lesson, I think, begins at home. I realized the value of relationships much more than ever before. I realized that in life, if you have a home, if you have food on your table, and you have your family around you during this time, more so than ever, I realized that it's such a great blessing. I've also realized that if you have 3 to good friends who are just a phone call away, and who are there for you each time of the day or night, if you can call them and they'll give you the right advice and they'll be there for you, their shoulder is there for you. That is, but when you go out, I have seen so much, but I would not try to call these people who discard or who kind of left their loved ones. I don't want to get into a judgment call on that. But yes, it was very tragic. But I also saw the sense of bravery, especially the doctors, the health workers, the nurses, the crematorium workers. From each person you learn, and when you are going day in, day out and looking at life closely, when you see life closely, and more than experiencing life closely, I think it teaches you so many things.
What reaction has your family had to your adventure? It truly is a marvelous adventure. How has your husband, daughter, mother, how have they reacted to this repeated visits to hospitals and crematoria and so on?
My husband and my daughter actually were my strongest pillars. My mother was always skeptical and paranoid about my visits, so I would not actually share too much information with her. And during this period, she was not staying with me. She was at my brother's house, so I didn't have to involve her too much in my decision making, because she was not around. So there were two decision makers on a day-to-day basis, my husband and my daughter, and I was doing it in conjunction with them. There were days that they would advise me that, I've done it too much and that I should now relax, and maybe, whenever they would read those news reports that is the spike is, it's spiking and it's getting difficult out there. Then they would ask me to rest, but I would not be able to rest for more than a day or two. And then again, I would start lobbying for my cause. And then I would, if my husband was briefly going out to work for a couple of hours, then I would get on a con call with my daughter and my husband. And then my daughter would actually lobby for my case, saying that Mama really wants to go, Papa. Is it okay if she goes? She'll be careful. And, she would lobby for my cause. But then we would take joint decision. But of course, without their support, I would not have been able to do it. They were constantly very supportive. My daughter, each time I would come back from the shoot, would actually look at all the images and would leave pasted notes for me. In every morning, I would find them on my table. And she would make sure that I exercise every day. She put me on this very rigorous cardio plan that I had to work out every day for an hour, which actually kept me in good shape and spirit.
Yeah.
And in a thing like this, it's also how you motivate yourself.
Yeah.
But, I was keeping good company by both of them, and as well as a lot of my friends outside who would actually discourage me but encourage me.
Last couple of questions, Parul. I know that, all these pictures were shot on your mobile phone, right? And that's really truly staggering. It's really staggering that pictures of this quality could come out of a simple, small little phone, and I presume it's an iPhone.
Yes.
Did you consciously choose not to shoot with a SLR camera, or what?
I like to shoot. I'm a phone photographer.
Yeah.
Krishna. So I actually use a DSLR or any other heavy equipment. I am a big believer of the technology. I think technology is such an enabler today. So it does not really make a difference. The camera of the phone is for me as good as any other traditional camera. So it doesn't, but it was in a way very useful to shoot on a phone, especially when you go to places like where people have lost their loved ones. A large camera, to my mind, at times can be obtrusive.
Yeah.
And in a way, a small phone camera works, it's much more discreet, and it kind of makes you, it kind of just helps you being there but not being there almost.
And have any of the older photographers, Delhi's better known photographers, seen your work? What's been the reaction really to some of these pictures?
Yes, very quite encouraging reaction. I haven't actively gone out showcasing my work to them, but I get a lot of whenever on some occasions, each time I've posted some of my work on social media handle, I've got a lot of encouraging reviews. And also sometimes very mixed reviews, Krishna, because people people just don't expect you to be doing something like this. I don't know why it is so surprising for them.
Yeah.
But I think it's the job of a photographer to document, right?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm not doing anything novel.
Yeah.
So sometimes those kind of reactions, I am not actually doing it to evoke any reaction. I don't really, it doesn't matter so much what the reaction would be, whether they would be negative or positive, because when I posted some of these crematorium images on social media handles, I also got a lot of criticism saying that, why did you go there? Why would you do something like this? Did you even go there? There were people who asked me that. Can you imagine? They said, did you really go there?
Yeah.
And I actually didn't even want to get into a confrontation or explaining or clarifying myself. So I just let it be.
Okay, one last question, Parul. Now, so what is the plan with these pictures? You have thousands of images. Will you do an exhibition?
Yes.
Will you put them in a book? Are you planning to start a website? What is the whole idea now with these pictures and all the other pictures you've taken in this period?
Yes. So as I said, I've documented almost 10,000 images of Delhi under lockdown/COVID. Roli Books approached me some time back when they saw some of the images on social media handle. They approached me and they actually signed me to do a book. This is going to be perhaps the first book on COVID/lockdown, which is due to be published sometime in August, late August. That's what, and it's going to be a visual narrative of Delhi under lockdown and other aspects attached to the lockdown, including COVID. This is due to be out by August end. An exhibition maybe at a certain point in time. Right now, I don't think it's the right time. Perhaps a virtual one. Yeah. But I would love to showcase them to the larger public.
Have there been any international photographers or agencies which have been in touch looking at these pictures?
One of my photograph of a migrant child just got featured by Getty Reportage. So Getty Reportage features the works the visual vocabulary that they kind of, whatever the visual vocabulary that resonates with them, they showcase those works every week, and they call it's part of the Getty Reportage from different parts of the world. So the migrant girl child who I recently shot under a flyover in West Delhi, she was stranded alongside her family, and she belongs to UP, Uttar Pradesh, but she could not reach her hometown because of the lockdown. That work got featured in Getty Reportage.
There's been no video work you've done, right, on this story? Nothing you've shot by video?
Some bits of it, but I've largely been focusing on still photography.
Well, Parul, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast to help us understand what it takes to shoot pictures like this in times like this. And thank you very much for your time, and most importantly, thank you very much for your bravery in shooting these pictures.
Thank you, Krishna. Thank you, and I hope we all come out of these extraordinary times and life resumes to normal soon.
Thank you so much.
परमात्मा ने जब बनाया तो उसके जो आईटी प्रोफेशनल्स थे, उन्होंने ऐसा सॉफ्टवेयर डाला है कि मैं छोटा सोच ही नहीं सकता.
The theme music for J-Pod was composed by me, Krishna Prasad, using GarageBand. Many thanks to the radio and TV anchor Vasanthi Hariprakash for her support to the net paper. And visit parulscape.com to view Parul Sharma's exquisite photography, or follow her on Instagram at parulscape. Thank you very much for listening in.